I want to make a video called cultivating an audience because I think about my image a lot. I think about I've I've had a hard time cultivating an audience in uh real life or online, both in terms of choosing and wanting to, and cognitive dissonance around wanting to. And I think you find that it can be much more preferable to be the audience of someone else than it is to have someone be your audience, to have someone observe you, where we like observing others, and we think of observing others as being observed by them, maybe. And this can lead to kind of fantasy about how another will relate to you. I'm currently having that. Fantasies. Fantasies are nice, but it's unrealistic to think that, you know, there's some sort of uh, way you can organize things that, through industriousness or whatever, and this sort of analytical thought to the nth degree, and each thought, bada bing, bada bang, will, you know, make reality sort of conform to your expectations. Which, in the first place, what are your expectations? And so, cultivating an audience, I was thinking about making this video earlier, and I was thinking the demographics they have in movies. There's multiple terms, and one is kind of for the movie maker, one is for the audience. The one is I forget the term, but it's for a movie that makes the money, right? And for a person, this would be like a job, right? So that they can, pursue their passion projects, or so that they can make, you know, cooler movies. So, like, an anime studio, analogously, would make a bunch of trash light novel adaptations, like, oh, I went to an isekai, and I was in school, and I fell in love with my Emoto, and, like, ganbate and shit, and fascism, whatever. Anime sucks. I say that as an anime fan. But then there's Four Corners movies. Well, the other one was tentpole movies. But Four Corners movies appeal to uh, boys, girls, men, and women, right? Of course, you know, gender. Then there's, theys. So what appeals to theys? But then you could say, oh, I'm femme presenting, I'm mask presenting, or you could say, no, I'm not neither presenting. But you know, I don't know. What about sexuality? I'm sorry. Um. So this Four Corners movie sort of concept. Um. Even this, with with so I've become attracted recently to this idea of postmodernism as, like, that no longer is there an understanding that you can kind of do something for the common good, because there's too many contrasting narratives. So it's kind of, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, kind of, but not quite. It's more like that good or bad in the first place. I don't know, but to box that piece of dog shit that I just said and put a bow around it, right? It's to say that, media nowadays, because things appeal to different people source different things. And so the nature of the content appeals to the nature of the person, but the nature of the person also creates the nature of the content with, you know, advertising, hype cycles, and stuff like this. And, all of it being spoiled, the glitz, the sort of spectacle with Marvel movies, the groups, even, because, like, the one time I went to see a Marvel movie in theaters, it was with friends, right? Gee, you might be saying, Harry, you have friends? And yes, this was back in high school, so they were different friends, which I'm unfortunately bad at keeping friends. Or that's just high school, but um, I'm also hard on myself and very full of shame. Yeah. I have a dry sense of humor, but also it's not funny. Uh, so then you're not really. Who are you appealing to? You're appealing to this push and pull of I like this, I don't like this, unless you're a woman, in which case you can't decide what you want, and men decide for you, and that's good. I'm just kidding. That just applies to food. There you go. I did sexism correctly. You can't say I'm wrong because every stereotype is right as long as it's stated in correctly and not incorrectly. Like you can't say, uh, you know, black people have extremely big like elbows. People would be like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Black people have big elbows?" You know? And you're like, "Yeah, they have such big elbows. They're like this big." You can't even see what I mean by big right now, but like really big elbows. And this guy, he's like racist as shit, and he's like, "Yeah, that's why I hate black people." Okay, Harry, focus. Um, so you have all these intersections and just people's particular experiences where, the intersectionality is, let's call this, kind of contrasted, actually. How about we say it is kind of the opposite of intersection? What is the opposite of an intersection? Is kind of the nexusality, the dead endality, something like that, where you can talk about all these like labels. There's a reason that people say they try to rap, but labels are kind of like an informal measurement of basically what you imagine people can versus can't get, but they're all spectrums. But it's just kind of So imagine language, for instance, right? So imagine, uh, for one, we have like a pigeon, right? Like, or a Creole, like a Jamaican. Is Jamaican Creole? I don't know shit about language, even though I study it all the time. But let's say we have like very refined Jamaican dialect. Refined itself is like a, you know what I mean, versus the Jamaican dialect that is harder for me to understand, right? Or TNT, Trinidad and Tobago, even, right? Any kind of English dialect, then there's gonna be kind of a class, a location, which is kind of like blackness. And even if you don't really occupy the same place, you kind of can relate through how you relate to other people. So I relate to him, relate to that, relate to versus, and this is all on this kind of perception of race versus like white people who. So the crucial difference between white people and black people is kind of like the Republicans say that black people always see race, but just because, you know, it's kind of the tendency to see it as oh, things get better if you don't focus on negativity, right? Sure, if you don't focus on like, negativity that is kind of a creation of your own head, sure. And to an extent also if you ignore the negativity of others, right? But when things start to get insidious and endemic, it can be hard to really spot negativity in the first place. And also, oh god, I'm so tired. Fucking, oh god. So this kind of belies it, right? Because when black people see white people, they're seeing it through the screen of blackness, right? They see kind of an objective, kind of universal, like this is black, this is white, this is how white people perceive black people, this is how black people perceive white people, right? Both both relations, they see race, and then people are like, I'm colorblind, I don't see race. So then white people, you get to this whole thing where white people don't get race because like, for the most part, like shit doesn't talk about race. Like what's that fucking thing where the black guy, the prisoner, pukes out butterflies? Green something, Green Hill, Green Room with Tom Hanks or whatever. And there's so many things that are like, they have this kind of auxiliary depiction where it's like racism is bad, right? And it can even be like, horrible, but it doesn't get the subtleties in a way. Because if you think about it, it's like secondary. It's hard to depict something like that because, in a way, it exists in the kind of plausible deniability nowadays. Like, I'm not racist, or because are you? I mean, there's a difference between like, oh, I love the KKK and like implicit racism, as it were. And it becomes a little bit of a thing like the Adam reaching God thing. But in this case, right, white people, know what they think about black people, but they don't really know what black people think about white people. It's like it's like not really a two-sided conversation. It's because when say you have 90% of group A and 10% of group B. Group B is very used to hearing themselves talked about, right? But then group A is not very used to hearing themselves talked about. So they'll be very much like, oh, I find that offensive that you generalize over all of our group, but it's just like, that's what you do. So it's just kind of a natural way people talk about groups because that's how a person as part of that group has treated them, or you label them as like group A person did that to me, and then someone's like, why would you say that about group A, And then it can even be like, oh, just because someone's mean to you doesn't mean racism. Someone from group A was mean to me too, right? But that forgets that it's still a group. There's still pro-social things happening, right? So you can have trauma in your sort of circumstance, but say like there's like a Jewish tribe, right? And then I'm just like me, right? There's a difference between you circumcising your child and you like randomly circumcising me, right? Because that's your tradition, right? So then even outside the context of like racism, there's a context of just like different traditions. And then there's a context of you don't accept what B says about you, right? But you want B to accept what A says about them if it's polite enough. So this is just, supremacy. This is preferring one standard of judgment over another. A over B. I'm so fucking tired. But then, in terms of creating an audience, this is relevant for many reasons. One is, oh, I need to plug in my charger. Oh, my charger is upstairs. Okay. One is because you have Mailstream and all this other stuff, the fronting of certain identities. And two is because, this kind of the fact that everything is media, right? But then the media that's made public into who, right, is also relevant. And what we assume is important, right, is also important. Or what we don't assume is important, that's also important. And so that basically, sums it up on lines of performance and competence, right? Then this is a big performance thing. You can have differences in competence, but it's arguable that the difference in performance in the first place is from valuing one way of looking at things over another, and even just valuing one person over another because you assume that the way they look at things is more accurate, is more clear, because you don't have the picture of the other person having that like view of things, but you have that like protagonist mindset for the other, right? So there's no universal standard, is basically what I'm saying. It's whatever you can perform. And we come to a crisis of honesty here. But what I'd say to a David Foster Wallace, even, is that, yo, you don't have many black people in your stories. Why is that, dog? Oh, shit. I just call you out. You better come back to life and defend yourself. Fuck. So then, yeah, that's the basic gist, is performance, and this is complex. Oh my, I'm about to die. So, how can we have everybody heard? Does everybody want to be heard? These are all questions. Are they the right questions? I don't know. Goodbye.